Hey y'all, I'm back. Just got back from the Grand Prix where I focused entirely on Commander. And of course, the deck I brought was Shimmer Zur. Um, I'll let you guys know now. I played 17 games. Out of those 17, I won 15. The two I lost, one of it was just a legitimate loss. Can't get around it. And the other one, I was in a pod with a bunch of newer players, and I don't know. I felt kind of bad trying to just win off with Zur, so ended up killing myself. But that's besides the point. So the deck list I have now is a little bit different than the video I went over before. Um, some notable changes. I took out Ristic Study. It was just honestly, I was winning on turn 4, turn 3, and so having casting Ristic Study turn 3 or turn 2 instead of holding up control spells, I would rather have that counter to try to stop my opponent rather than the potential extra draw. Normally, I didn't need the draw, so surprising. Some other thing is I cast my commander almost as much as I could at the very beginning. So normally my strategy, cast her as fast as I can, try to bait out their counters and their control spells, and then afterwards tutor and try to get necromancy or try to do ad nauseum. There was a couple cases where I cast ad nauseum for without Angel's Grace, and I still ended up winning. I put the highest converted mana cost I have in this deck is Paradox Engine, Force of Will, and Misdirection at 5. So I was safe to go all the way from until I got to 5. So whenever I got to 5 is when I stopped, or below. A card that got MVP was Children of Corliss. Now, when I was going over the last deck tech video, I was talking about how you could use Children with Necromancy to draw double cards, which is true. However, it also allows you, if you get it afterwards or can somehow put it on the field, like say if you use the Vidalcan Ori, which is not in the deck list, I might put it back, but honestly, I only cast Vidalcan Ori once. It's something I barely ever used, and the only time I would say you would want to use it is if you're trying to cast Demonic Tutor or Merchant Scroll. But that being said, I might try to find a place for it. It's just so many games, it just wasn't necessary. But Children of Corliss, if you're using Aetherflux Reservoir and you somehow cannot get to enough life to kill everyone at the table, you can pay whatever amount of life you can get to, and then you sack your Children of Corliss to get even more life. I made a mistake in one game. I still won, but I made the mistake of not realizing that paying the life for the Aetherflux could also net you life with when you sack Children. So if you're at 75, you have 2 people to kill, you don't sack Children right away for whatever necropotence you paid. Pay 50 life, Aetherflux, then sack them. You'll gain the 50. Then you can kill them both. So what I also found was having draw spells was really important, because when I drew into the Necromancy for 30 cards at the end of turn, I would have plenty of tutors. You know, you have Enlightened Tutor, Mystical Tutor, Vamp Tutor. Great tutors to put on top of your deck, but you need a draw. And so I added Opt to the deck. Brainstorm was always in there, but I also added things like Mind Stone, which I previously had taken out because it only adds a colorless. And then, of course, I always had Commander Sphere for the same reason. So pretty much Opt and Mind Stone were the 2 cards I added, just to give me that extra ability to draw off of a tutor that goes on top. Because all the instance, of course, we have tutoring is top. You know, Limdol's Vault. And you can even make the argument that you should always go to about 7 life when you Necromancy at the end of your turn, just so you can have 3 to 4 life to play with for Limdol's Vault, which lets you dig another 20, 25. And, you know, if you're drawing 30, and then you dig 25 with Limdol's Vault, you know, honestly, you have to think like, okay, so I'll probably get a Limdol's Vault, or I'll get a Shimmer Zur, or I'll get a Wrath, who's just another Shimmer Zur, but as a creature. You're most likely going to get one of those. So I found that going into Necromancy and trying to do it with only 1 mana and hoping you get something like a Dark Ritual was a bad idea. It just doesn't work. And so you definitely want to try to make sure you have 3 to 4 mana whenever you go into it. Same with ad nauseum. Unless you're doing it at the end of your opponent's turn and going into your turn, it just wasn't good to do it on your main phase unless you have that 3 to 4 mana. So yeah, 115 lost to got like 940 ticks, which is equivalent to 2 box of standard Guilds of Ravnica and 22 packs. I entered for $100, and the boxes I could probably sell for like 150, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. But honestly, it would pay off my registration fee plus the 22 packs I could open for just trade value to get other cards to make this deck better. This deck is still missing something like an Imperial Seal, but it is a sorcery, so I'm a little iffy on whether or not I'd really want it, because it's a sorcery and it puts it on top. So it's like you're telegraphing to everyone, hey, mill me, and you also can't exactly play it at the end of your turn unless you give Valkenori out, or I put Quicken in the deck, which I don't want to do either. So honestly, I don't even know if it's that good of a card. Same with Lion's Eye Diamond. I saw one for like 100. I should have probably traded for it. That was my mistake, because the rest of the day they were 160 plus. But that's another card where I'm like, I'm not sure if it's really useful, because you have to discard your hand. Just the way it works makes it really awkward for you. One other card I took out for note is I took out Hurkyl's Recall. Hurkyl's Recall, good card, but really hard to make work, I found, because having to return the Shimmer and then float enough mana to be able to cast the Shimmer. Like, it worked when you had things like Mana Vault, Grim Monolith, Helm of Awakening, Mana Crypt, all that. Like, when you had the bee's knees for your low cost artifact mana base, it was fantastic. But when you were working with a bunch of Signets, Fellowar Stone, not Mindstone, but Talismans, things like that, Soul Rings, it made it difficult, because you couldn't really net too much mana. You could net some, but like maybe you could only net 3. So if you're gonna net 3 and then you're gonna play it again, and then you're barely gonna get all your artifacts out again, like, what's the point of that? That's where I found Paradoxical Outcome, much better card. The fact that you get to choose and you can return things like your Necromancy, your Zur, and any other card you find, like a Mystical Remore, anything else that you don't need, you just return. Same goes for Reign of Filth, fantastic card. And honestly, Chain of Vapor. Once again, you're choosing which things you want to return, and all the cost is to sacrifice for your lands. So this is a deck I brought. Like I said, I won really, really well. Made out. I made money, honestly. With how much I won and the amount of tickets I won, I made money. So definitely going to be doing this and bringing this deck again to the next tourney I can get to, which I think is probably going to be in Seattle for Magic Fest or whatever. But yeah, if anyone has any questions about the deck, I also took out Buried Ruin because I found that with having Capsize as the secondary win condition, I didn't need the Aetherflux Reservoir. It wasn't necessary anymore. Capsize also worked fantastically with Paradox Engine. There was plenty of games where like all I had was Paradox Engine and Capsize I could get to with a bunch of mana rocks, and I just bounced in everyone's land. Like, yeah, I wasn't drawing or I wasn't killing them immediately, but most of the time people just scooped right there because they look at it like, what are we going to do? Only being able to play one land a turn, getting it bounced right away. So we have to, like, no one could do anything about it. I had tons of counter spells, tons of bounce. It just, there's nothing you can do. And then you just swing out with, like, yeah, sure, you're swinging with like small creatures, but those rack up over time. Yeah, that looks to be about it. I personally like 30 lands. Honestly, I could see cutting Grafdigger's Cage. I added Grafdiggers because I went up against some decks like Protean Hulk, Yisan, just any green deck that had Quarter Calling. Just, I found it to be really, really annoying. And Grafdigger's Cage, 1 cost artifact. You get it early, it causes so much disruption for them. It's practically, or absolutely is no way it affects us. So it's just great card to have in there. But honest, I found 30 lands just helped me run really consistently compared to the 29. You could also, I could see taking out an Azorius Signet. I say Azorius because black is really the most important color. Whenever I'm searching for lands in this deck, I'm looking for a black or a swamp +1. So if I have like a marsh flats, I'm looking for swamp plus plains, swamp plus island. But always getting a swamp as many times as I can, because having that black for that necromancy is really, really important. And yeah, so that's new deck. That's how I did. I'd say biggest takeaways is Children of Corliss is great with Aetherflux. Having as many instant speed draw spells as possible is a great idea. Having Boomerang so you can return any permanent, including a land that might be messing up, was really helpful. I could even see putting Disenchant to the deck. And then going with just getting away from that. I took out Blue Sun Zenith, that wasn't helpful. Took out Ristic Study, that wasn't helpful. So just getting to like the bare minimum of what you need to win and what's going to be the best control that you can cast. And yeah, so that's it for this. I hope all y'all having a good time. If any of you went to Grand Prix, let me know. And if any of you are planning to go to the Magic Fest in Seattle, I'd love to meet up and hang out or obviously play Commander. So, and that is that. Hope you guys are having a good one. Logging out.